Welcome at Chessedelic. This is Grandmaster Karel van der Weide with 2 lectures on the Wolga Gambit. The Wolga Gambit is an opening I had in my repertoire for several years, and it brought me some success, also some minor experiences. But this first lecture is on the Final Chateau variation. And I had some ideas in that line, and I will show you. So the Wolga Gambit goes d4 knight f6, c4 c5, d5 b5, pawn takes b5 a6, take on e6, g6. Best way to play knight c3, bishop takes a6, knight f3, d6, and now Final Chateau variation goes g3. Main line here is e4. We will talk about it in a second lecture. g3, bishop g7, bishop g2. Now best to first develop knight bd7. The most modern approach is to play rook b1. White wants to play b3 as quickly as possible and bishop b2. In order to avoid counterplay along g7 b2 diagonal. And well, it took some time before black had an answer to that. Regularly black would castle and white could play his moves, b3, bishop b2, castle, and well, in my opinion white was just a pawn down. Well, excuse me, black was just a pawn down. So it was, in my opinion, necessary to get to business at once. It was with knight b6, and I will explain why. If white castles now, bishop c4 comes, and black will win back his pawn with equality. So b3 is obligatory for white. And now this idea, which was, as a matter of fact, a brainchild of my good friend, international master Elke Wiersma, who played Wolga with black, bishop c8 back. Because we see that every position has its differences, and if white tries to profit with his rook on b1, well, we maybe have to try to disturb this idea with bishop f5. So it's about small differences in chess. So bishop c8, and well, that's some experiences in this position, some games. And most of my opponents, they played knight to h4 in order to protect the f5 square. A very interesting game I once played against Ukrainian Grandmaster Neverov. He played queen d3. And this is such a typical nice coffee house game you only play a couple of times in your life. So it's maybe nice to show you what happened. Queen d3 because, well, he defends against bishop f5 with e4. That's how the game went, and now miraculously the bishop goes back to c8, and it gets even stranger because after queen c2 I played bishop a6. You see, there's a sort of perpetuum mobile. It goes here and goes there, and all the time the bishop goes. And well, okay, it's we can make fun of this, but there's of course a very sound positional idea in this. I mean, with bishop f5, black provokes e4, and with bishop a6, black hinders white to castle. So white has some ways to defend against this. He can block the diagonal, and he could have chosen in the game for, let's say, a4, bishop a6, knight b5, or he could have chosen for knight e2, bishop a6, knight c4. Okay, black is still playing, like for example here you play knight e7 and knight e5, it's keep the ball in play. In the game, Neverov decided to abandon the diagonal by playing queen c2. So I hindered him castling, and the guy decided to exchange this bishop on his diagonal. I did not want to exchange this once because his king walks to g2, so I played queen c8. Maybe Neverov should have played the take on e6 and queen e2, but he decided to play it another way. He checked me, and bishops were exchanged on b5, and after rook a5 he played a4. Okay, now so he's loose now. It's certain the guy will castle. But I have some ways to still to prevent this. Maybe not by queen h3, because the line went bishop d2, and when I exchange sack a rook against knight now on b5, queen g2, queen e2, it looks pretty safe for him. And therefore, in this position, I first decided to play queen g4. So his knight has to go to d2, and only now queen h3, because now there is no bishop d2. He can still attack my rook, not with bishop, but it's queen c3. So I sacked the exchange, and with queen g2 I made an end to castling for the rest of his life. And I just played this in slow motion. I castled because, well, why in this position a minor piece should be less worth than a rook? What are the rooks doing here? There are no lines for them, and if there are no lines, well, rooks they're just bad. So I threatened to take on e4 now, so he plays bishop b2. I play further in slow motion. I want to push e6 and to construct sort of vis-a-vis of rook against king. Okay, so let's get rid of this. Not so easy, as we see. And Neverov maybe made a mistake here. His best chance would have been to evacuate the king, as we see that king e1, e6, exchange on e6, king c2 is pretty safe there. It's not the end of the world. I can continue in some way. But okay, but he decided to put his king on e2. And here in the center he's sort of crossfire. Bishop h6, knight f3. And here I have a nice move. I have e5 in order to threaten to take on e4 now, because there is no more checkmate on g7, excuse me, h8 as a matter of fact. So, yes. So, well, he has to search for counterplay at the other side of the board, queen h5. Of course, the most ridiculous way to continue would have been now knight g4, queen takes b6, knight h2. Okay, but it was maybe a bit too much. It was not necessary. I could just regroup. Knight d7, rook g8. I just go back. Initiative never gets lost. You should remember that. G4, and knight takes e4. So now we get some material back. We get some pawns. Queen c7. No panic. No hurry. Knight f6. Queen c6, and I move my bishop in, bishop f4, and the guy begins to run with his passed pawn now b6, because when he would have decided to play g5, I take it once and queen takes b3. There's all sort of play on this board. So b6 he played, knight takes f2. If he takes back with his king, e4 is strong. Knight takes f2, he decided to play rook b1. So I took another pawn on g4, and he pushed the guy with b7. Okay, e4. He decided to get a new queen, so he gave the old and got a new one back. Here I made a mistake, but it was, you see, it was a complicated game. It was a bit of time trouble. I should have played quietly king f8, but not so easy to play such a game, to play such a move. I took on f3 at once, and this gave him the opportunity to take it. And after queen takes it2, king f1, it was not so easy to continue. Therefore, I should have left knight on f3 in peace and just start with king f8 and let him play a move. But luckily, after he takes, he played king d3, and now he was losing because it went f2, king c4. I hunted him all over the board, king b5, queen d7, king a6, I took a queen, rook takes, knight takes d5, and he resigned because I'm going to checkmate him on c7 or b4 somewhere, and I already have enough material. So this is such a typical coffeehouse game which can resolve from Wolga Gambit. Okay, it was a bit of a sideline here after queen d3. Main line here is knight h4 in order to defend against bishop f5. But fight for the f5 square goes on. Black plays h6. g5 is a threat in order to recover or re-win f5 square. Queen c2. And we're still fighting for the f5 square. Queen d7. So, and it appears now that black is going to win the square, because g5, queen f5 is unavoidable. Well, not say unavoidable, because at this stage f4 would be possible, but then bishop b7, bishop b2, knight g4, and all sorts of counterplay on black squares here in the white camp. Okay, so this is crucial position after queen d7. I played it in a lot of games. And maybe best here is to put bishop on diagonal, bishop b2. But I had some opponents which decided to put bishop on d2. Like my game with Alexandrov. Okay, it went g5, knight f3. And well, we can see that black is able to win the pawn back, but after a long variation it goes like this: knight d5, knight d5, all gets exchanged, knight takes g5, bishop b7, bishops gets exchanged, let's say f3, g4, bishop c3, and bishops gets exchanged, rook h7, rook b2, black is a pawn down. So long line, but pawn down. So therefore after knight f3 bishop b7 is required, and it's a bit of the same like we had in game with Nevrov. It's idea to provoke e4, and then we can play bishop a6 in order to hinder the opponent castling. Let's say Alexandrov played a4, I castled, he played a5 to put my knight on a passive square, knight c8, and he played e5. And here I made a mistake, but it was very learnful mistake. We will later see that black should have taken on e5, but I played knight h7 in order to keep my structure alive. But now the guy really kicked me. He played h4, g4, and now the magnificent blast knight g5. And well, after that you're still shaking behind the board. And well, let's see what happens. For example, if you take it, H file will be opened, and there is no defense in all sorts of lines. I mean, F5 for example, the guy takes it en passant, and you have to give your piece back. Knight takes, and rook takes, queen h7, knight e4. This is hopeless. And let's say after taking, you take with pawn and you take with knight, then the bishop takes g5, f5, and also en passant, and queen j7. This is a disaster. Bishop a6, rook g8, bishops gets exchanged, check, queen h8, rook f7, king d2, and you cannot defend against rook e1. So in the game I decided to take with knight on g5, but it, excuse me, this didn't help of course either. Alexandrov took back with his pawn. I took on e5 with my bishop, rook takes h6, f5, he checked me, king f7, rook e6, king e8, b4, and I took it, rook takes, but it appeared that after rook a7, knight a4, rook c7, queen b3, I have no moves. He completely surrounded me with his pieces. He's going to play, for example, rook b8 and knight b6. He is just suffocating me. It's yeah. So, and what I should have done, and in the end it would have been quite logical. After e5, I just should have taken it. And knight e5, queen c7. And strangely enough, after knight c6, this was also given in New in Chess yearbooks, analysis by Igor Stoll. Normally he's very good analyst of games, also of Kasparov games. And he said it was better for white, but I do not agree. I think black has several ways to get counterplay. Maybe the best try is e6 and just rook e8, and yeah, we have counterplay all over the board. I mean, that's one possibility. Other possibility, playing more slow motion knight e6, getting your pieces back in play. Because you see, you can be one pawn down, or even in this line, 2 pawns down after knight a4, rook e8, knight x5, bishop b5. But the most important thing is, I mean, the white king, it doesn't come out of the center, and as long as that doesn't happen, white is in all sorts of trouble. There's also always some initiative. So I don't think that in this position bishop d2 is that much of a problem. Maybe therefore most of my opponents played bishop b2. Okay, now again we have this typical fight for the f5 square. So it goes g5, knight f3, queen f5. Exchanging here is no good, because bishop will come on f5 and there will be problems defending bishop on b2, and there's pressure then on this diagonal if the rook has to leave. So therefore e4 is the next move, and there's a nice square now on g6, nice hideout. And okay, of course white can castle now, can get his king away. So does black. It's no time yet to, because of the pin, to get the pawn back. It doesn't work tactically, because now you have to, you can't hold on the pin. You have to take the bishop back and take on d5 and your piece down. So in this position black also has to castle, and it looks like everything has been as it comes okay now for white, but white still has some problems. There is the pin of this pawn, as we see. This pawn cannot be moved. There are also sort of tactics. I will show you some lines. Not only that, but there is always white has to be careful of some threats against a2 pawn, which means that knight on c3 cannot move for the moment. And there is also some positional idea of moving this knight and f5 coming. So I can tell you that black has all sorts of counterplay. Now, in my game against world champion Kazantzanov decided to play queen d2, and that might have been a very wise decision. Because, well, on the other hand, in all lines, black will have counterplay. Let's say rook d1, knight g4, a4, f5, h3, knight e5, knight gets exchanged, knight b5, bishop gets exchanged in f4, and yes, also because of bad bishop here, and black always has maneuver to put his knight on e5, and I think black has full counterplay. So yeah, Kazantzanov decided for queen d2, and some of my other opponents decided to cover the queen. So there will be no tactics against d5 or some things. No tactics against d5, but we will see that there are other tactics here. I had it in 2 games. Against two young girls in both games, I decided to play knight g4, a sort of positional approach. Maybe knight g4 is not the best. I will show you a better move later. Also because if white doesn't want to, knight g4 is a bit drawish. You can let's say play h3, knight e5, knight gets exchanged, and knight a4. It's a very ugly way to play. So the young Sabine Voiser played with me knight a4, but Okay, if white wants a draw, or then yeah, it can be very nasty. Because I had to exchange knights here, I had no alternative. Bishop takes d2, knight takes b6, I take on c1, a8, bishop a3, knight b6, and my bishop on a3 is in trouble. And also, if I would have decided to play bishop a6, then knight takes b6, bishop a1, rook a2, knight c4, and white is protecting bishop on b2, and I am 2 pieces against rook down. So, therefore, knight a4, I was forced to exchange knights, but as you can see in the resulting position, bishop takes c5, d takes on a4, bishop a6, rook e1, rook c8, well, black is hanging in, but maybe slightly worse, very unpleasant to play. And well, you should never play these kinds of position where draw is the highest results. You always, like in Jonathan Rawson books, how many results are you playing for? You should play for at least 3 results. That win is also possible. Okay, my other game I had in this line rook c1, knight takes knight g4. My opponent Marlies Bensdorp decided to play a4, and here I definitely should have played f5 in order to get counterplay. Let's say taking bishop takes, queen d2, c4. You have to play this energetic with black. And maybe therefore, when we go back to this position against rook bc1, we should play what Dan Brandenburg did recently. He played even more energetic. He took on e4, and that's the way to do so. Because, well, knight h4 looks to be the best move. Point of knight takes e4 is when white takes with his knight rook takes a2, and we technically will win back the piece. So therefore knight h4 in order to destroy black pawn structure. Bishop takes e4, f5. And the opponent of Brandenburg decided to play bishop f3. I think bishop g2 is more safe. Brandenburg anyway came with knight d2, and we see that black has all sorts of counterplay. His knight will come in, and there are some f4 things, there's the f-file. I mean, yeah, this is the way Wolga should be played, actively, energetically, and well, not concerning material. So, okay. Therefore, maybe Kazantzanov was wise in this position to get all the tactics out, to get rid of all the knight takes e4, all the knight takes d5 things, and play queen d2. Here I went wrong against Kazantzanov. I played queen h5, and in analysis he explained to me how it should be done. He said you should have done knight g4, and after, excuse me, knight g4, and after h3, knight e5, knight gets exchanged, and although even he has f4, you can exchange it, and bishop d4, king h2, and black has all kind of counterplay with, well, with king h7 and rook g8, and it's not easy for white because g1 square is covered, and it's not possible to play immediately knight e2 because a2 pawn still hanging. It's not required to play king h7. By the way, you can also have this f5 positional plan again. So in this Final-Chateau variation, I would advise you to play this this bishop c8 idea. It's yeah, it's always wise to play something active and well, to give the opponent a fight, to let him work for the advantage. And well, therefore I don't think that Final-Chateau variation is the main problem for black. I think main problem for black lies in the main line with e4 and exchange of bishops on f1, and I will tell you about that in the next survey.